folks. Have you heard about this red holographic phone, the one that's going to cost $1,200 to $1,600? I'm Sean Hollister with CNET, and I'm here with my colleague Patrick Holland, fellow camera and phone lover, to talk about it and give you an idea of what's going on here. We think it's going to be something special, partially because it's a crazy phone like we've never seen before at a really high price, and partially because it's a modular phone. And modular phones with interchangeable parts are an idea we haven't seen work out very well yet. So, first off, we want to talk about who the heck Red is, because you may have heard of this phone, but you probably don't know who Red is as a company. Patrick, if you want to tell us a little bit about Red, you've got some background with them, I understand.
Yeah, I've actually, so Red is a camera maker. Mostly they make cinema cameras to make films and movies. I think they were founded in like the mid 2000s. 2007, I believe, was the first actual release of a camera. And what was neat about it, it was meant to be a modular system that shot at the time 4K video, which was at that time a very big deal. And because of that, a lot of filmmakers would use this, and it quickly got adopted into Hollywood, like with Peter Jackson.
This was part of the big transition to digital. Because
Exactly.
filmmakers are all about film, and Red was one of the companies that comes along and says, hey, let's do this digital. And they made these crazy tank-like big black behemoth cameras with all these modular parts. So they had kind of a head start on this whole modular thing.
Yeah, the box of it almost looked like a grenade case or something. It was like just big and metal and durable. And because of that, it was able to capture these beautiful images that would compete with the likes of, at the time, film. And, you know, since then, we've seen them be used on Marvel films, The Hobbit and stuff like that, and TV shows. Almost anything digital is filmed on Reds now.
Practically all of these big budget TV shows you see on Netflix, for instance, House of Cards, Daredevil, and a bunch of these Marvel series, they're all filmed on these Red cameras. Even though if you've never seen one of these cameras, you've probably seen what's come out of them.
And it's beautiful. Like David Fincher is like one of the biggest people on that, hence the House of Cards tie-in and stuff like that. Now, just to be clear, there are other amazing digital cinema cameras like the Arri Alexa and stuff like that that have come out since, but Red was kind of the first, and it's interesting because the quality of the not only the image out of it, but also the quality of the actual camera product. It's big, it's bulky, it's meant to be used. It's meant to be used on location and in studios. It can be adapted to be run and gun, where you're putting it on a shoulder, kind of like a news camera style. And then it could also be adapted to have these amazing cinema lenses on it with displays and monitors out to directors. We were talking before the podcast here that you could actually tie two of these together, like Peter Jackson did, to shoot in 3D, which he did on The Hobbit.
Yeah, Peter Jackson used these for the Hobbit series. But you're not here to talk about, to hear about cameras necessarily. You're here to hear about a crazy new phone. And this is called the Red Hydrogen. It's a phone that's going to be made out of titanium or aluminum alloy, and it'll cost as much as $1,600. That's just the pre-order price for this phone. I don't know if we got a picture that we can throw up on screen.
And this thing here. This is the only picture they gave you in order to make a purchasing decision.
They kind of had this little teaser announcement. They said, hey, you know, we've got a phone. It's going to be this much. It's going to be made out of these metals, and it's going to have a crazy screen, the likes of which you'd never seen before. Wouldn't you like to buy it? Here, go ahead and buy it right now. And that was all we had to go on until we started digging into some patent filings, until we started looking a little bit deeper into what the company had said. And the weird thing about Red is, for Red lovers, that was enough for many of them, because this is a company that does this all the time. They say they're going to do something really crazy with a product, and a lot of people don't believe them. They're like, okay, how the heck are you going to build this crazy camera sensor out of nowhere and stick it in a body and sell it to us in this modular package? But they've done it time and again. So when this phone came out, a lot of the Red lovers were like, okay, I'm going to go for that. The rest of us are back here scratching our heads thinking, well, you know, what's this company on about? They've never made a phone. What are they doing here? And what the heck is a holographic display?
As I say, like, so yeah, they are not an electronics company, so to speak. Like, you wouldn't think of them like a Samsung or an Apple, where they're creating lots of different consumer products. In fact, you might argue that the Red camera is not a consumer product. So to have something like that high end and that specific, say, we're going to make a phone, you're like, that's crazy, but that's also why it's appealing, is because it just seems so out there. And there's been a lot of hype because of that, where if this thing, you know, is the holographic thing like Star Wars, like Princess Leia thing, or is it more like a Nintendo 3DS style? What exactly is that? There's a lot of questions about that. There's questions about the modularity. In that promo photo, you could probably see there's a bunch of like brass or gold pins at the bottom,
Yeah.
which kind of hint at something that you could attach onto, which we'll talk about, I
So
think, a
I
little bit
dug
later.
into a lot of these questions for a CNET story all about this modular phone, about this holographic phone. And the first thing I found out, which is super interesting, is this technology, this 4-view holographic video that they want to display in this phone, actually isn't something crazy or new. It's something that scientists and researchers have been trying to do for a long time. Basically, it's kind of like stereo 3D, where a screen gives you two different views. It's kind of like a glasses-free version of that, where you don't need, special cinema glasses or anything to see that. There's a technology in the screen to direct some of the light to one eye that's different from what goes to the other eye, so you get kind of a 3D view. But instead of 2 views, they've got 4 views in here, something called multiscopic 3D. So you don't just need to stay in one place and see like, oh, this image just pops out of the screen a little bit. You can actually look around to the left, to the right, and see around an object. This is not magic. This is not something that Red invented. This is something researchers have been trying to build for a while, and they just didn't have the screen technology necessary to show this off in a device that people would actually want to buy. So maybe this is one of those. But that's not all that this price is about. This crazy price is also about what we found in the patent filings. It's going to be a phone where you have interchangeable lenses. And I'm not talking about a tiny little, a tiny little phone lens on the back of your phone like I've got in this Samsung here or anything like that. I'm talking about big honking camera lenses hooking up to this kind of bayonet mount that you have traditionally in DSLRs. We found a patent for a miniature version of that could fit on a phone. And then when a certain YouTube star, Marquez Brownlee, got to look at the phone today, a little bit earlier this week, actually, he posted a video this morning. We saw that that's something they're actually integrating into the phone. They're going to have actual camera lenses you can hook onto this thing.
Yeah, basically, it actually, the module is kind of, it looks like it does two things where it gives you a sensor. Because remember, like the actual sensor inside a cell phone camera is very small. So that adds a sensor, but it also adds that circular area is going to add the place where you could put on a different lens mount. So I can interchange lens mount, which is a whole nother crazy awesome
And this is
thing.
where Patrick and I started getting super excited because we're super into photography, both of us. And we've both talked about this in the past, that phones, they just don't physically have what you need to take amazing, amazing photos that you get with a DSLR. Sure, they take great photos now. Don't get me wrong. You can get amazing photos on a phone. But certain things you can't do. You can't do aperture control, where you get different depths of field and allow different amounts of lights into the sensor based on mechanical blades. There's no room for those mechanical blades in a phone right now. There's no room for a big zoom lens. Other phones have had to get around that, like the iPhone 7 Plus, by having 2 cameras in the phone. One that's kind of already zoomed in and one that's not. And then they kind of interpolate the distance between them to kind of give you what looks like a zoom but isn't really. And you can't zoom very far with those. So all of a sudden, you add actual lenses onto a phone, we're in a whole different ballgame.
Well, and I think it's something that should be said is I don't think this particular phone's trying to appeal to the exact person that an iPhone or some of these other dual camera phones that have like that telephone photo zoom, or I don't think it's even trying to compete with something like the Moto products that you could add on, like the Hasselblad camera package or and whatever the 3D or
the Moto
360
Z
cameras.
phones.
Yeah,
The Moto Z phones, we've seen the Moto Z was one of the modular phones that said, hey, we're going to let you add all kinds of accessories to the back of the phone that just snap right in. They magnetically snap on. They've got little, what they call pogo pins or copper connectors, spring-loaded copper connectors that just snap onto the back of the phone and immediately make that electrical contact. And then we've got another phone like that called Essential. The founder of Android, a guy named Andy Rubin, founded Android. He did the Sidekick before that. Has a company called Essential where they're going to clip on modular products too. You can see on the screen in a sec. There's a 360-degree camera Patrick's talking about that can click onto the back of the phone the same way.
yeah.
This is something where traditionally, you're not going to want to carry something that big and bulbous in your pocket. You're not going to want to carry a giant camera lens in your pocket like a DSLR. But once you're talking about a modular phone, where this is something optional, where you can snap it on when you need it, you can take it off when you don't, all of a sudden, there's room for those kinds of products to exist. That's what I think, at least.
Well, I think for me, as someone who does video and cinema, I can't tell you how many people love to use like their smartphone, especially some ones that can shoot 4K, or you get an app that allows you to record high bit rate on your smartphone, and that's pretty cool. But you're still limited to the actual optics and sensor the phone's there. And now you're able to attach something on. As someone who has used some Reds too, I'm hoping it's not with the Allen wrench screws like you have to do on the camera, because that would be insane. But who knows? Maybe that's a thing too.
Well, I mean, that's we did see in patents. There was a patent diagram I found which actually shows the Allen wrench screws going into several components of this phone.
And that maybe also, if that is the case, all jokes aside, that also kind of tells you where it's aimed for too. I think if I'm able to turn a nice camera, a nice high end phone into a cinema camera, I'm competing with something like the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. I'm competing with image quality and controls I can get on some maybe $2,000 or $3,000 cinema cameras that I'm not going to get on a phone, even if I add on like the Moto Z's Hasselblad camera. This is not going to compete.
The other thing to think about is this isn't necessarily for an audience who buys a phone and then expects to add all kinds of modular camera accessories to it. It's also for camera people who want to add modular phone pieces onto it. Because every couple of years we get faster processors in our phones. We get faster Wi-Fi and 3G and Bluetooth and all these components that you only find in cell phone screens, touch screens. The touchscreen on my phone is so much more advanced than the touchscreen on my camera. Here I've got a Canon T4i, which was one of the first Canon cameras to add a articulating touchscreen on the back. This thing is nowhere near the resolution, nowhere near the touch. Everything about this touchscreen is inferior to the one on my new Galaxy.
It's almost more of an afterthought. And what's interesting too, I think, going back to the hydrogen one as well, is the fact that the cameras themselves, the other thing besides shooting really great image quality of the Red camera, was that you can, after a couple years, hey, there's new processors. They call it a brain module. I can pay to have my camera upgraded to the newest processor and that.
This is with Red Cinema cameras.
Red Cinema cameras.
They've been doing this for years and years now.
And the reason I bring that up is I'm wondering also if that's going to be a case where if I buy this $1,200, $1,600 phone, if there's going to be modules that are able to upgrade stuff like that image sensor for the cinema.
And it looks like there might be. We found some patent images, you'll see them on screen in a second, where we saw them piece together multiple giant pieces of phone. So you'd have your one phone piece with like these special ridges on it so you can grip it well, and then you stick these other pieces on there, and one of them could be a battery attachment, and one of them can be inputs and outputs so you can hook it up to a monitor, and one of them can be a stabilization model. You can have module where you can have image stabilization for the entire unit. And then the one on the end is an actual entire camera sensor and lens assembly, so you can stick those interchangeable lenses on there. So not just the lenses are interchangeable, the camera sensor could be as well. So in a year or two, maybe you put an 8K sensor on there instead of a 4K sensor, or whatever it is.
On a smartphone.
On a smartphone.
I mean, there's still smartphones that ship with 720 HD video, so to be able to shoot 8K video on a smartphone is insane. Another thing with Red is their images on the cameras are raw images. So when you take a photo like with your Canon there, you can either get JPEGs, which most phones shoot in a JPEG, where the camera or the phone is processing that image for you, or you can get a raw image where it allows you to control some of the settings after the fact more in depth. So when the Red cameras came out and were able to shoot raw video, and you're able to like get your colors back and those like highlights if they're blown out a little bit.
A lot of cool post-processing you can do with raw.
It makes me wonder like what I'm going to be able to do with that Hydrogen One, and also the name Hydrogen One. I don't know if you're familiar. And all joking aside, there's a chipset for the Red camera called the Helium, and I'm wondering if this is like at all like something tied to that, or if that chip's going to be in that module that we saw, or in that add-on.
For all we know, they take the same sensor from the cinema cameras and they put it in the phone in the future.
That would be insane. I mean, this is mind-blowing. Now, is my dad or brother going to buy this thing? Definitely not.
That's the question. So I think that because Red has such a history with modular cameras, and because their audience is small enough and they don't need to like go out of their way to blow away the everyday consumer, they can afford to be successful with a niche modular phone product. But where a lot of other companies have just given up. Like, for instance, I went to see the Project Ara guys, the Google Project Ara guys a while back. and they were trying to build this modular phone for everybody. And they were talking about, oh, it could be only, $300 for the frame, and then you could add on these extra components, and you can change out your processor every year. And then they had to pull back their ambitions a little bit, and they said, well, people kind of want to have the best of everything that goes into a phone every couple years. We'll just make it a few additional modules, like a phone, like a camera, like a special. You could have a pollution alert if you live somewhere where there's a lot of pollution, a little sensor in there that monitors the carbon monoxide levels or something like that. Just limited module things, and even that was too much for them. They got folks in there. They had executives there who said, no, we need to build a mass market product, and they shuttered the whole project. And now a bunch of those Project Ara folks, they're working for Facebook now, possibly on a phone. They're bunch of hires there around modularity, so maybe Facebook is doing something there. But we've seen some of these high-profile failures around modularity. Google, LG, Moto, even Moto, who's building a whole line of Moto Z phones around their Moto Mods initiative. They don't seem to have a lot of stuff going on there. Is this the company that can make it work on a miniature scale, on a niche scale? And then could they take that expertise and go a little further? Is there room in the market for a phone that's this expensive for everyday consumers?
Honestly, I think there is. I mean, I think the failures of those other phones it was like kind of modularity for modularity's sake. Like it feels like, hey, yeah, we made this road, and there could be this kind of car that goes down or this kind of truck, but we haven't figured out exactly who's going to use the road.
There's no cars on the road yet.
There's no cars on the road. Where I think what Red's saying is like, hey, we're going to make this path, and it's going to specifically be for something similar that we've already done in our camera line, which is a modular approach. Different, albeit, but at least in the same vein.
Yeah. In the patents I looked at, Red's patents for the modular phone, the patent is like 3/4 their original patents for modular cameras, just showing that they've had such a history here. But yeah, this high end, this question of high price for a phone is going to come up not just once this year, because there's also the Galaxy Note 8 coming up. There is the iPhone, the latest iPhone. It looks like there's going to be a high-end iPhone that might cost $1,200 compared to the normal iPhones where you get in there for like $650 on the ground. This one could be $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 for an iPhone. So this question of, is there room for a high-end phone? I think we're going to get it asked several more times this year. Where I think Red has an interesting advantage, where I think modularity actually has an interesting advantage, is that people can buy the parts they want. They can kind of make this investment in the future because they're going to add additional parts down the road. And they can, and it can open up parts that just wouldn't be available in a phone previously. Previously, you have to justify a really mass market phone. You have to have kind of a one-size-fits-all part. Your camera, your modem, your processor. It has to go in millions, hundreds of millions of phones in order to be a legitimate business, which is why NVIDIA, companies like NVIDIA, dropped out of the mobile chip game. They said, hey, we can't get our Tegra processors in phones. We don't have the economies of scale that a company like Qualcomm does to get it there. We don't have the deals in place that Qualcomm does, so we just can't make it at all because we can't get the deals with phone manufacturers. But if you had a modular processor, NVIDIA could sell it on its website. NVIDIA could sell it like a graphics card, like they sell graphics cards right now. Anybody could buy that thing and stick it into their phone. They don't need to have all these middlemen in the way. They don't need to have all these OEMs building the smartphones in order to build that processor. The same goes for camera companies. They want to build a new camera that goes on this. It doesn't need to be Red building the lenses that go on this camera, or the sensors, or the adapters. That could be another company. It could be another company building those modules.
But I mean, I think if you at the smartphone market as a whole, I do think there is room on the high end, and whether it's something very specific and modular like this Hydrogen One is seeming to be, or something like a high end iPhone or a high end Samsung phone. I think there's definitely room for that stuff. And I also think on the bottom of the market, which we cover a lot too, with budget phones, the lower end is getting so much better that it's kind of, you're raising all ships by rising the tide, raises all ships.
Yeah.
By having that bottom end have such premium feature sets on some of these budget phones, I think that also lifts it. And also it allows people to go like, wow, what else can I get? So you have tiers of things like you do in
That's
other
right. There's
markets.
a spectrum now. Previously, it was very much, you want a new phone, you're going to pay $650 for a good one, or you're going to pay less for a crappy one. And now it's, you can pay $200 for a good phone. You can pay $70 in some cases for a good enough phone. And then your $650 is a better phone. And your 850 is an even better phone. And maybe there's room in that market for a $1,200, $1,300, $1,600 phone for those who see the use cases for cinema and photography.
Yeah, and I think going back to like brought up that the Apple rumor and stuff like that. I mean, currently, just in the phones they have, you have the 7 and then 7 Plus, and there are big differences not only the size of the phone but in the functionality of what it can do. And you are paying a premium to have that functionality.
Right.
And I think it's an interesting like kind of you're dipping the toe in the water for Apple, like. Well, man, what if we did something better with this display,
Yeah.
or what if we did these things?
They've already said you want a better camera, pay a little bit more, you get our bigger phone with a better camera. Doesn't necessarily need to be the bigger phone. Maybe it's just better and better camera. That is one of the top things readers ask for. Is they say,
Absolutely.
which phone is the best camera?
And we look at Samsung too. I mean, there's maybe they're going to be this other Note phone coming out, and that usually is their premium, their top of the line thing. It's usually a lot more expensive. So I think for Red to compete, it does something very specific. It kind of think of it like almost like a sandbox, and they're going to have this little corner over there that no one really occupies. And I think if they're able to pull this off, I'm going to go back to that holographic screen for a second, because I think that's the other question here. We talked a lot about the camera side, the modularity, the price, but I think that screen is curious because they're able to actually pull that technology off on a phone. That could be really impressive, and that does put them at their own corner of the sandbox where I don't know anyone else is doing something like that.
But what nobody understands, including the existing Red customers, is how they're going to shoot that content, how they're going to film for-view content. I mean, there's ways to do it right now, but like,
so it sounds like
Red going to have a way to do it?
So it sounds like there could possibly be a need for a camera or something to capture content like that. And I'm not trying to be a smartass here, but I do think that
You've succeeded anyhow.
Thanks, I try. But I do think that there is a possibility that this opens up a new wave of capturing things, whether it's for that specific kind of content. I don't know how AR VR would work on. If you recorded off such a device, or if you'd have a special module for something like that, or how it's going to play with stuff like Android or Google Tango. I mean, there's so many questions. Just
another great
interface
technology
side.
that hasn't gone off the ground yet. Google Tango has all these sensors, these dual cameras, and this time of flight sensor, all these crazy things they put together so you can like kind of measure the real world around you and turn it all into augmented reality. They haven't been able to sell a lot of phone manufacturers on that. But what if that was a modular product you just stick on the back of this phone?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you've got a place for that to go, a platform where people can try the latest and greatest technologies for smartphones. So here's the thing. Here's the rub. The thing that my colleague Scott Stein brought up earlier in one of our meetings, he was saying, but Red, and these other companies, do you really want to get locked into their ecosystem? Because there aren't any standards for modularity right now. If you buy this Red phone, or if you buy that Red modular camera, or whatever it is, do you have to only buy Red products to attach to them? Do you have to only buy Red approved modular products to attach to them? Do you want to get locked into that ecosystem?
Oh, it's so tricky because my mind goes immediately to Apple and think of something like the Lightning connector, right? Where that was supposed to be something that was maybe possibly widely adapted, but is not only proprietary, but to have products plug into that is made by a third party, they have to go through basically a certification process. Part of me thinks to launch this successfully, I think it's okay for Red in a way to have it be proprietary, because that's been their success on the camera side.
Yeah, I mean, they do lock you into their solid-state drive cartridges, their battery adapters, all this other kind of stuff. You can use third-party batteries with a Red camera, but you have to buy Red's adapter to put the batteries on.
Exactly. and that gets into the other part. So, I mean, there are things where, it would be great to have a standard for modularity. And, I mean, there's kind of two big names that could lead that, which would be Google or Apple, in the sense that I would think it'd have to tie into also the functionality of the operating system. And so whether that is like, hey, it's going to be these 12 pins, and you can have certain phones that have that, and it interconnects with all these different products that have been certified by Google or whoever that board would be, and that would be cool. But I just don't know if there's a demand for that kind of, is it going to be like a USB kind of thing where all these companies are working together on a standard to evolve it over the years too?
I mean, Scott was saying maybe it could even be wireless. Maybe that's the kind of standard we need, is something where they don't have to have all these little copper contacts in between them. They can use 60 gigahertz frequencies or something else that's short range and very fast in the wireless realm to transfer the power, to transfer the data, to do all that kind of stuff. The one advantage to proprietary right now is it's got a heck of a lot of bandwidth possible. You can do whatever you want through your own custom backbone in a modular system compared to you've got these specific limitations for USB, for Thunderbolt, for Lightning, for all these other different port schemes that are out there right now. But on the flip side, if you want something like a battery in your phone, you can buy a USB battery today and plug it into just about any phone with a micro USB port, and it works. You can even add an adapter, a little adapter for Lightning. Whereas if you buy a red battery pack for a red phone or a Motorola Moto Z mod for the Moto phone, it's going to be obsolete if you ever have to get rid of that phone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the thing to also consider too, you're talking about like being able to transfer like content. If you're shooting 4K, 6K, I don't know, even 8K, I don't know, who knows what the thing's going to shoot. And I'm shooting at a high bit rate, a really big fat file that's going to give me a lot of information. I need something that's going to be fast at that, and wireless is definitely not there, even on the high end to transfer that amount of data.
Yeah, I'm talking about raw.
I need a connection that's a hardware connection that's going to be able to transfer that data quickly. But I do think Scott's right. I think over time that's got to be the way it works. And isn't that Essential phone isn't it how it works? They talk about wireless USB. Isn't that what that Essential phone?
Essential is using a wireless transfer protocol. From what I understand, those copper contacts are there for power and to sync the thing, but not necessarily for the data transfer. The data is supposed to be wireless there. So that's something to look forward to, maybe. I want to leave this on one last interesting note about this phone. One other unique thing about this phone that we haven't seen before, and that Red has several patents on, one patent and 2 patent applications in process, the ridges on the side of this phone. This phone has big metal ridges on each end. If you want to put we'll have those on screen in a second with a nice blown up image of those ridges. It is scalloped to such a degree, and it's got these tiny little ridges in there too to help you grip this thing. And Patrick had an interesting observation about where those ridges might have come from, too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're seeing someone's hand hold it, and you could see where your fingers might fit when you held those, especially if you have bigger hands like me. I could see that being a very comfortable thing. But also, again, coming back to the nerd cinema guy, a lot of like prime lenses, especially if you're using, have like old Nikons or Voigtlander lenses, a lot of those lenses, the focus ring on them has scalloped edges sometimes. Which when I first saw that, it's like, oh, it looks like the side of a lens, and your reaction was like, really? And then I shot you all these like pictures of lenses. Yeah, that makes sense.
My lens here only has just the basic ridges on it. It doesn't have the big scalloped ones like you'll see on some of these Voigtlander and older primes, especially.
Yeah, mostly primes. But I think what's neat about that is there's a nod to not only the way when you look at that phone, if you were to show a picture of a Red camera next, just the box, even the brain of it, next to that phone, you could definitely see everything from like the little like red jewel in the middle on the logo to like it looks like a heat sink. I don't know if that's practical or just for design. I thought I heard in his video that there might be carbon fiber on the body, which is kind of crazy too, let like the Wi-Fi and like cellular signals.
Yeah,
so it's using some of the same design cues and materials that
when you've got an all-metal phone, you need to have some kind of antenna break somewhere for the wireless signals to get out.
Exactly. And also, I know the other thing we always get questioned not only on a smartphone is camera, but durability. Like if this thing is made out of titanium and carbon fiber, I'm gonna feel pretty good about if it drops or I don't know how the screen would react.
If you're not aware, people who are listening, titanium is crazy strong. If you
Very
ever go
strong.
to like an REI or something, they'll sometimes sell cups made of titanium for backpackers and other instruments made for backpackers, because backpackers need to have very, very light backpacks. They need to take as little weight with them as possible so they can carry, days and days worth of food and clothing and things like that. They are so strong. Go ahead, try to bend one of those.
Yeah,
Take
or like
yourself to an REI and try to
parts,
squeeze one of those
parts of the
things.
space shuttle was made out of titanium too. I mean, it's like it's one of the lightest metals that has that rigidity and strength that you need to fly people to space.
So
which I would
definitely
feel
wanna
good
try
if
a
that
phone with
technology, if I have space shuttle technology in my hand, shooting a video, I'd feel really good about that.
Yeah, sounds great.
Did I say space shuttle? I should say, yeah, that'd be weird.
Well, I mean, aluminum alloy came from a lot of aircrafts use aluminum alloy as well. We're not going to throw aluminum under the bus.
We could do that, and we put Velcro on it and drink some Tang, and we're like all NASA. We're ready to do our NASA cinema documentary with our Red Hydrogen 1 camera and the modular 8K, whatever it's going to be.
Yes, I will gladly accept an offer from Red and NASA to go do that.
I would do that in a heartbeat, man. I would totally do it in a heartbeat.
All right, thanks so much for chatting me about this.
Oh man, yeah.
It's super exciting.
I'm super excited. We can't wait to get our hands on one when it actually is ready to go.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, and you can check out our full article about the hydrogen, including those patent drawings, at cnet.com.